Hi, and welcome to the No Ceilings podcast on the Turtlesmith Network. I am Courtney, and this is Calvin. What's up?
Man, I forgot my name. It's 420.
I'm gonna need you to remember your name, bro.
I don't know if I can do that right now, man. It got me too good. No. How y'all doing out there? Thank you for tuning in today.
420.
We did. We actually had a 2-in-1 holiday that just passed.
That's crazy.
Easter, obviously Easter Sunday, but this year for the cannabis crowd, their annual 420 holiday passed on the same day as well. So we decided we're going to do this week a episode about the business of cannabis.
So I had, just to point out, shout out to my sister Casey. I had a shirt. I said, I need a shirt that has Smokey on the front. And then on the back, I need the quote that says, God put this here for me and you.
And you.
And so she put the whole quote. It was pretty dope. She had Smokey on the front, and I needed the picture that I wanted was her of where Smokey was like doing Michael Jackson, and he had the 2 blunts in his mouth. He's doing like that. Shout out! I didn't wear the shirt today, but I'm gonna bring it because it was pretty dope.
I got to shout out our baby sister as well too, because we had the twins' birthday party over the weekend, and as you know, she was out of town, but. Yeah. She made their birthday shirts as well, and I really like those. They actually made some really good pictures and stuff too, so I'm gonna have to show y'all some of those. But yeah, we had a shift, I guess, in the way that a conservative state like Oklahoma looks at cannabis. A few years back when they passed the laws here to make cannabis for medical use, meaning that you have to be a medical patient and you have to have a medical card in order to go into dispensaries to be able to purchase and access the market. And so, but a lot of states, from what I found out recently, see, it's something like, I want to see, I'm pulling up the stats here really quick for you guys, just so I can be correct about this. But cannabis is actually legal, and I want to say it's somewhere about 70% of all counties in America have at least one dispensary.
Wow.
As of January 2024, 24 states have passed some type of recreational laws for cannabis. In additional, if you add in the medical states to that recreational number, that number jumps up to 41 states. And so I'm going to try to remember to put this up on the screen here. But we're looking at a map right now of the United States, and the places where it's either recreational or medical is largely bigger or way bigger than the states that are not.
Yeah. Yep.
What's shocking to me? Which one would you say is the most shocking state to you up there?
Utah.
That was the same for me. I was like, I cannot believe out of all places, like, I mean, Oklahoma was pretty shocking, right? You know, but looking at it up there, I was like, the only place I feel that's more holier than Oklahoma would be Utah.
Yeah.
But, you know, the more shocking thing to me is that some of the states that haven't legalized it anyway, neither of the Carolinas, Tennessee, Texas, Indiana, Wisconsin, Kansas, Nebraska, or Wyoming or Idaho are the only states that are kind of left out of this whole dance.
Yep. And I mean, Oklahoma started their program rather quickly from the time that the law was passed. They had 60 days to get the program up and running. So just think about that. Unless there was pre-research done on everything that they needed in order to get it started, then they didn't have everything that they needed in order to. They were just ready to process the first application coming in from the patient, not necessarily the compliance team, all of the people that they needed to help and assist with the licensees who were, needing to process business applications and things as well. So it was a rat race.
Yeah, I imagine it was. I mean, trying to get a statewide regulatory program up and running in 60 days is a large task. And I assume a lot of these states had similar ways to it. I know one state in particular, Ohio. Ohio has both recreational and medical use. But when they started their program, like as of right now, as of today, I checked before we started recording, still to this day, you cannot right now apply for any type of a cannabis license in Ohio, because what they did was initially when they started their program, once they passed the law, they decided they would do a lottery system. And so you could put in as many entries as you wanted to in this lottery system, but only a few were going to be chose. And so they were able to control the amount of licenses right out the gate. And so I imagine that may have made it a little bit easier, at least on the regulatory side. I'm sure that was probably hell for any potential retailers.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to get into today is, I mean, we know we're not going to get into the ins and outs of smoking cannabis. I want to get into the ins and outs of what is the business of cannabis here in this country, even though we know it varies from state to state. And then also, what are some of the positives and negatives and the barriers to entry into this for a lot of people? So I'm pulling a lot of my statistics here today from FlowHub. FlowHub is a company that put out a POS software tracking and all that stuff specifically for cannabis. I used to use this at a dispensary that I worked at up in Oregon. And so what they also do is they take a lot of their information directly from those POS sales, inventory, and things like that. So for me, I feel like I can trust their statistics just a little bit more.
Right. Okay.
So if we're looking at, I mean, we'll start off with use, or just with some of our key findings here. 47% of Americans have tried cannabis. And that's the statistic that I was talking about there. 79% of Americans live in a county with at least one dispensary.
Yeah, that's funny. Dang.
There are over 440,000 full-time equivalent jobs supported by legal cannabis. And the industry is expected to reach almost $45 billion in 2025.
Amazing.
One of the things that I do find interesting, and we'll get here to this in just a second with one of these other facts. All of the forecast models say that the cannabis industry is growing. But then when you start, no pun intended, but when you start looking at individual states, most individual states are reporting that their cannabis programs are shrinking. The revenues are going down. Even this is also being reported by, the cannabis companies and things like that themselves. And I think personally that there's a main cause for that regulation.
Okay.
But I also think a lot of it is also due to the archaic tax laws that we have against cannabis companies. Cannabis companies are not allowed the same write-offs. They're not allowed the same tax incentives. They're not allowed any of that stuff.
That's crazy.
And they're also, I think, in some cases taxed at a higher, like their effective tax rate is a lot higher,
right,
because they don't have those. And so that's why I think a lot of businesses are reporting losses, is because they don't have the ability to do what a regular company would do tax-wise. Adult cannabis use, like we said, is now legal in 24 states. Support for legalizing cannabis hit a record 88%, so nationwide. And let's see, boom, there it is. Average retail cannabis prices have dropped 32% since 2021. So they've lost almost a third of the market, as far as real money.
Right.
And they're not getting any of the breaks on the back end.
Yeah.
So it really sucks if you are it's great for you if you're a cannabis user, obviously,
Yeah.
right? Even cheap weed, nobody's gonna shake a stick at that. However, if you're the retailer that's kind of getting squeezed on both ends, you have to keep your prices low enough to attract customers, but then you're getting hit over the head with all these taxes, these licensing fees from year to year, and things like that. Like, how do you make money?
Yeah. I mean, here in Oklahoma, of course, we were super oversaturated.
Yeah.
There wasn't a cap on the licenses until, they put a moratorium in place. But even then, like, we were still super oversaturated. And so, I, for my thoughts are that um, I feel like the mom and pop shops kind of lost out here.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the big companies have kind of won it out. But at the same time, we're still, I think that this state is still kind of weighing everything out. We don't know what it's going to look like, you know.
I'm glad you said that because that actually goes right into a video that I found that kind of helps a little bit with understanding some of the things about the industry. Full disclosure here, I no longer have YouTube Premium, so if we got to cut out an ad here, I'm sorry. But let's see here. Yeah, there we go. We're on the right one.
Whenever a state legalizes cannabis and starts considering regulations, they need to decide what to do with vertical integration. My name is Steve D'Angelo. Some people refer to me as the father of the legal cannabis industry.
Okay.
The term vertical integration refers to a particular type of business model in which the business controls and manages the entire supply chain, from the creation of the product through its distribution all the way to supplying it to the end user. Farm to table is a very simple way of understanding vertical integration. There's a farm, they receive orders from retail consumers, and they bring those orders to the consumer. So they do it all. In the world of cannabis, vertical integration is a hot topic. People are usually in favor of it or against it. Different states end up with different regulatory models because regulations are political questions. So in the state of Washington, for example, which has a deep, long cannabis culture, there were lots of small growers who were growing it in Washington for a long, long time before cannabis became legal. Those growers were at the table and they were organized when the regulations were being developed. And they made sure that vertical integration would not be allowed because that would open up more opportunities along the supply chain for small companies that could focus on individual little niches of the supply chain. So you can be a small farmer, or you can just be a small little cannabis edibles company. When vertical integration is working well, when it's really serving the consumer, it provides the consumer a superior product, a fresher product at a lower price. This happens because one company is managing the entire supply chain, so they don't have to share parts of that value chain with other companies. The model of vertical integration that I think is very controversial is mandated vertical integration. Mandated vertical integration is when a state is regulating legal cannabis and they say that the only way that a company can get a license is if it grows the cannabis, manufactures all of its products, and runs its own dispensaries. The problem with that kind of mandated vertical integration is that companies that are vertically integrated at that scale require huge amounts of capital. And typically you end up with only 3, 4, or 5, I think in Florida it's something like 7 companies. It's important for cannabis consumers, and really consumers of any regulated product, to understand how that product is being regulated because those regulations have significant impact on consumers. They have impact on the prices that consumers will pay for the product. They have impact on the taxes that will be charged on top of those prices. They have impact on the type of products that will be available, where they will be available, what times of day, what days of the week. So the lives of consumers are directly impacted by those regulations.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a really, and what you said was perfect, leading right into that. Um, the only way I think personally for you to make it in the cannabis industry is vertical integration, because of a few things that he kind of touched on there for a minute. One of the things I want to go with the negative side of it first.
Okay.
The forced vertical integration. In some states, that they do say that you have to be farm to table if you want to be licensed in this state.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if we just start kicking around numbers, to buy a farm, you're looking at probably at least a cool mill, depending on where you live. I'm just going to say on average, maybe a little cheaper in the Midwest, but you also can't go grow really quality cannabis in the Midwest for a variety of factors, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of pushes you out to the areas where you can, which are more coastal, which are definitely going to be more expensive. So you're back up in the mill, right?
Yep.
But then let's say, for example, I'm a company, and I'm just going to go with Oregon. Let's say I'm a company in Oregon, and my base of operations is in Northern Oregon and Portland, area, the Portland metropolitan area. But the best place for me to grow and the cheapest place for me to find property is down in Southern Oregon. Well, now I got to pay another cost to get that brought from the farm to the table, right? Or to where I'm at, to where I'm distributing. And so that's another place where some people can plug in and be a part of the cannabis industry and just transport, but vertical integration says I have to do it all. And so I'm going to have to figure out, now I'm going to have to purchase vehicles and run those back and forth multiple times per week, all that gas, that wear and tear on those vehicles. Then I have to have somewhere to warehouse them and distribute them from. Then I have to have somewhere to distribute them to.
Right.
And I have to pay for people to work in all of these places. I have to pay for separate licenses for all of these things. And so we see really fast how that ticket on starting a business in one of those places that requires you goes way up. And now it becomes a huge barrier to a lot of people to get into that industry, right?
Absolutely.
So now we're just creating another playground where only the rich can play.
Right.
But that's on the negative side of it. On the positive side of it, however, if you are able to, and if you're a business owner, I figure you understand the building of block by block, brick by brick. There are a lot of ways that you can become a vertically integrated company with all of the facets of that company in under a couple of years and not have to raise a whole lot of capital.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I looked at for this model as, you can start out as a medical grower.
Yeah.
Which is a lot lower barrier to entry because you're not having to pay for a license.
Right.
You can start growing. You can start building out your the number of patients that you grow for. That'll increase the number of plants that you can grow. But in some of these places, and I don't want to be specific because I know I'm either going to forget some or get some wrong. But I know of in some of these places, if you are a medical grower, then there are co-ops and things like that you can go to for some supplies that you may need to be able to handle your crop.
Yeah.
So if I'm growing for, if I'm growing 125 plants for, X amount of patients that I have in my book, then I may be able to go somewhere and get, some soil. I may be able to go somewhere and get some trellis netting. I may be able to go, just little things that I may need to kind of help me out with that, right?
Yeah.
But then I kind of get that reputation built up and then I decide, okay, I want to do this license now as a commercial grower. Well, I've already built up the capital to do so. I've already got a facility that I'm doing out of, whether it's indoor, outdoor, or whatever, because I wouldn't have gotten to this point if I didn't, right? And then you can kind of make that flip. And then where you go after that is on you. If you want to go from that and then open up your own retail location, obviously it's a different license fee, but you start sending your stuff to your own retail location, buy stuff from other people, sell it out of your retail location. At some point during that time, you can get you a processor license. Now I can start turning this cannabis into other products, edibles, salves, topicals, things like that. And so there is a clear path, I believe, if you want to be in this industry, that you can follow to not guarantee, but at least bolster your chances for success.
All right. Yeah. I definitely agree. I think that I like that clever way. That's a pretty clever way to do that. But, and of course, different rules for different states. So,
yes.
Making sure that you check the regulations and know what the regulations are for your state in order to be able to kind of, start that business. Because if you are if you're patient or if you're a caregiver, there are certain rules or regulations around that and how much you can or cannot grow. So just making sure that you know everything, ins and outs, so you can do it and do it legally. So that's the big thing.
I know it tripped me out the first time I came after a harvest, because the company that I work for, I did a lot of their media stuff. Media has just been my life. Everywhere I go, I'm doing media. But the year that we harvested 250,000 pounds of weed.
Wow. That's a lot.
That right there was an eye-opening experience to me as to how big this industry both is and can be.
Yeah.
That was 250,000 pounds that we harvested on a year that we had some rows go bad.
Yeah.
And so I think the number that it could have been was somewhere close to about 300,000 pounds had we not had those setbacks.
Yeah.
And then they added, I want to say 2 or 3 more fields the following year. So it should have only been gone up since then. And that's one company in one state producing that much in one small area. And then we're surrounded by other companies doing the same exact thing. And when I say there was so much cannabis and hemp grown in that valley over the years, a common occurrence would be getting to harvest time and not some people losing their fields because they just clearly did not have the amount of workers available in the area to take the flower down out the field. That's how much weed was growing down there. Wow. They did not have the number of people that they needed to take all of it out the fields. A lot of people lost farms that way.
They could do a tour out there just so you could go out there and smell it, huh?
Man, I'll tell you what, there is no better smell. Fresh cannabis doesn't smell like the end product that you get when you go to the dispensary. It's got a very, very sweet smell. Yes, it's beautiful. And there are some mornings where we walked out on that farm and you just get that smell up your nose. Yep. It don't smell nothing like weed. It just that nice, really sweet, floral, clean smell. Oh my God. I live for those days.
So if somebody were smart, they'd get like a tour going where they get people on like some kind of bus and you have the windows down and you just go through there.
I would literally legit get people on a tour and just take them, like link up with a farm and just go through there because it is cool. So interesting. All of the different things. You don't notice anything different from any other type of farming until you turn around and look and see that the crop is a cannabis plant. Mm-hmm. Everything else is pretty much the same. Yeah. With a few different, caveats here and there. Yeah. But it seems like just kind of moving forward here, one of the biggest barriers to a lot of this is finances. Yes. It takes a lot to start those farms. It takes a lot to get a building. It takes a lot to get a license. One of the things that we found here today, the real money market, the real money value versus the asking price of a license. Mm-hmm. If you go to states like Oregon, Washington, Colorado, the asking price versus the money value price on a license is about the same. They're more established places. You know what I mean? And it's not a lot of barriers to get a license there. But you start going back east, New Jersey, New York,
Okay.
Places like that. Some of those asking prices are in the millions for a license.
Yeah. Yeah, I
In
believe
the
that.
millions. When the real money, the real world price, or the real price of it is still in the hundreds of thousands. That is a huge barrier to entry for a lot of people, specifically minorities and women in this country, because we don't have the access to a lot of that capital either personally, nor do we get granted the access to that capital from venture capital firms or investors at a higher clip than, you know, our straight white male counterparts do. And so with that, I actually found the state of Washington. Let me pull it up here. The state of Washington did something very, very interesting when it came to that problem specifically. And what they did was they created a I guess what's the call? What is the social equity program for cannabis licensing? And so in this social equity program, you obviously you have to qualify for it. And so what they mean, or what they're looking at for this social equity program is it serves to reduce barriers and promote equity and participation in Washington State's adult use cannabis market by those most adversely affected by the war on drugs. So it's a little bit more of a, hey, we realize that something wrong was done in the way that we're conducting business now to those that were doing the same thing back then. So we're going to try to make room for those people here in this program. So in 2023, the legislature passed Senate Bill 5080, which made the changes to the program and increased available retail licenses, as well as expanding the social equity and cannabis program to include a limited number of producer and processor licenses. So they made it to where you can, it's just more than just retail that applies here. As a social equity applicant, that means an applicant who has at least 51% ownership and control by one or more individuals who at least meet two of the following qualifications. And those qualifications are: one, having lived in a disproportionately impacted area in Washington State for a minimum of 5 years between 1980 and 2010.
I like
You see what that's really cool there, because that's one of the things that, one of the barriers right there, or one of the qualifications, is a thing that is often out of people's control, and they get penalized for it. Where you grew up at, where did you live? You know, people get penalized, and in this case, it's a plus.
Yeah.
Have been arrested or convicted of a cannabis offense, or has a family member who has been arrested or convicted of a cannabis offense.
I like that one.
Had a household income that was less than the median household income within the state of Washington, as calculated by the United States Census Bureau, or is both a socially and economically disadvantaged individual as defined by the Office of Minority and Women's Business Enterprises under Chapter 3919 RCW. And so they've created this program for essentially women, minorities, people that were impacted directly or indirectly by the war on drugs and the unfair enforcement of cannabis laws in the state of Washington. And what they did was they have a specific amount of licenses, which I think is a percentage. Correct me if I'm wrong here, somebody in the comments, but I believe it's a percentage of the licenses that are available or have been issued. So if the state decides, let's say they put a cap on 3,000 licenses, then a percentage of 3,000 is what's going to be available for these social equity. Now, if they release that cap and it goes up, then the number of these social equity licenses goes up and stays proportionate as well. So that was really, really cool to me.
I thought that's pretty cool. We don't, Oklahoma doesn't have, at this time, they don't have a social equity program that I'm aware of. But yeah, that is really, really, number one is very specific.
Really?
You know, your mama do drugs in the 80s, baby. 1980 to 2010, like,
That's a 30-year span that they're giving. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like that was one of the coolest things that I've seen or that I've come
I love
across.
that.
Just kind of doing a little bit of research for this episode. And they do have some more resources here, as far as maps and things like that, and the social equity plan and stuff like that. But I mean, for me, my takeaways from this whole thing, um, cannabis can be a great avenue for a lot of different things. It could be a great avenue for on the state side for tax revenue, for additional revenues, for a reduction in the crime rates. Because I mean, obviously, if you're not busting people for smoking weed, then your crime rate goes down pretty substantially, I guess, and things like that. But on the other side, it can also be great for young entrepreneurs to get into a business that they actually, have some type of an interest in, or that they may have found out that, hey, I've got a green thumb, and this is probably the most because cannabis is the highest producing cash crop as far as what I understand that we can produce here domestically.
Oklahoma has definitely allowed for that, for a lot of disproportionate people to get into the program, especially very early on, with that lower cost of entry.
Yes.
For the license. So.
And that's exactly where I was going next, because the bad side of what I see is a lot of what the industry could be but is not is due to regulation.
Yeah.
It is due to these companies not really being able to make the revenue that they could make, and then also not get any of the incentives or any of the tax breaks that other businesses get.
Yeah.
And so it really does do a squeeze on the owners, the producers, the processors. Everybody is taking a little hit of that along the way. And Lord forbid something really like catastrophic happen. I don't think a lot of cannabis companies that are out there can recover from a single catastrophic incident, whether that be a loss of crop, or whether that be if you're a processor, what if your machinery blows up or something, or your building catches fire. Like that stuff you can't insure. You cannot be insured for that stuff. So if something happens, then you're just at a total loss. It can be outside your hands. You could be in a place that shares a building with multiple other businesses, and the business all the way on the end catch fire and burn the whole building up. Now you out.
Messed over, yeah.
And so I do think that there needs to be more protections in whatever way that can be. Obviously, federal legalization would drastically help.
Yeah.
But there should be more protection for these businesses to allow this industry to thrive in the way that I know that it can.
Yeah, for sure.
When was the last time you smoked?
It's been a while. It's not really. I kind of like. Nope. I'll wear the merch. But I'm going to church.
You be too busy to smoke. I think honestly, if you smoked with as busy as your life would be, you would probably need 2 days to do a half a day's worth of shit.
Yeah.
And that's not really conducive to your lifestyle right now.
Yeah. I'm good. I'm good.
I'm one of those people that I do smoke daily, for a couple of different reasons. One, you've known me since I was a kid. My brain is constantly racing 1,000,000 miles a minute.
Yes.
Sometimes I need something to dumb that down a little bit. And then on that same token, when I try to go to sleep at night, if I don't have my brain kind of slowed down a little bit, then it takes forever to get to sleep. So also, that little trip to the garage right before bed, get everything taken care of. But I don't think I'm no longer a recreational smoker, if that makes sense.
Yes. You need it for a reason. And, if you think about it, there are some states here that, they're very particular about the reasons why you would get a card.
Yeah.
And some of the reasons that they have listed aren't reasons. Oklahoma's not like that. They have tons of reasons why.
Oh no, you
it
can
could
walk
be.
in Oklahoma, you can walk in a doctor around here and tell them, yo, I got an inflamed pinky toenail. Okay, you can get a cannabis card for that.
Yeah. And so, anybody that has, something that is not, real, that some states don't consider a real diagnosis, like anxiety or, insomnia, things like that. This is a medicine that can actually help with that, and I think that's something that's very important, and a lot of people believe in that. A lot of people don't want to be on opioids, and so I think that it's important for a lot of people to know and understand that this is a product that's needed, and it's a great business to get into for those who are interested, as long as they, know what they're really stepping into. And, hopefully we can create a space for minorities and women to really be able to thrive here in Oklahoma. But, as of now, there aren't a lot of options, but there are groups. They have a lot of groups on Facebook. I think that they all kind of work together, just to make each other knowledgeable about the things that are happening, and that's always good. So
That was one of the things I really did like about working out in Oregon. Oregon is already a very, very progressive, forward, thinking type of a city, or type of a state for the most part. And so in my time and my works out there, I ran across a lot of women, a lot of minorities that were the heads of some major cannabis companies, some major players in the game, even still now, while I was there. And it really did give you, I won't say a sense of motivation, but it gave you, I would say, a sense of, I can do this if I want to.
right.
You know what I mean? Like the barriers for me are not what I thought they would be, being able to have these people as examples. And so I think that was really cool. I think that if you are living in a state where cannabis is legal and you are thinking about getting into the cannabis industry, one of the first things that I would do is spend a lot of time studying your state's laws. Very, very, very important, because I can't tell you how many times I've come across instances where just one word left up and interpreted the wrong way meant disaster for a company
business.
or a brand or something. And I watched brands literally disappear overnight because of a little known part of the law that they didn't pay attention to that applied to them. So the first thing I would say is study the laws in your state, in your jurisdiction, and then study cannabis. When I say study cannabis, not only just the growing of it and the processing and stuff like that, not just those processes, those step-by-step instructions, but actually study it for what we've learned about this plant so far. The reason I say that is a lot of ideas for products, brands, or things like that are born from the details.
Yes.
And in cannabis, every strain is different. The way that some strains hit one person versus another person, all these things are different. But if you break them down to the smaller parts of it, the terpenes and all that kind of stuff, you can come up with ideas for different products that you probably never would have thought of. And you may just feel a niche in the market that makes you successful.
Yep.
And then lastly, I would always say never count your eggs before they're hatched, especially in this industry. Things
Good
can
point.
change on the drop of a dime.
All right. Sounds good to me. Well, that's our episode. So if you have any questions or comments or concerns, don't feel free to go to turtlesmith.com for any information. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And we out.